The cold Montana dawn broke over Oak Ridge as Emma Whitfield drove along County Road 16, sipping her coffee and mentally preparing for another day at the animal shelter. She'd been volunteering there ever since Westlake Veterinary Clinic had fired her last month, a small act of defiance against a town that seemed to swallow good people whole. Then she saw him, a German shepherd standing in the middle of the road, blood matting his dark fur, barking frantically at every passing car. When Emma pulled over, the dog raced to her, then darted back to the ditch where his companion lay motionless. A female shepherd, covered in wounds so severe that Emma gasped aloud. 3 days later, as Emma performed emergency surgery on the female dog Bella, according to her partially destroyed collar, she discovered a microchip embedded unusually deep in the animal's shoulder. The information it contained made her hands freeze mid-procedure, the surgical tools nearly slipping from her fingers. The registered owner was Westlake Research Laboratories, the company her adoptive father had built from nothing. The company whose ethical practices she'd questioned just before being terminated. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Oak Ridge, Montana wasn't the kind of place tourists stopped unless they needed gas on their way to Glacier National Park. A town of 500 souls nestled between pine-covered mountains, it had one main street, 3 churches, and 2 stoplights. But it also had Westlake Research, a sprawling pharmaceutical complex that employed nearly half the town's workforce. Its modern glass buildings stood in stark contrast to the rustic storefronts and weathered barns that defined the rest of Oak Ridge. The company's logo, a stylized mountain peak, watched over the town like a vigilant sentinel. Emma Whitfield hadn't planned to return after veterinary school. At 35, she'd built a respectable career in Denver before her adoptive father's health scare brought her back. Her straight brown hair was usually pulled into a practical ponytail, and behind her wire-rimmed glasses, her green eyes carried both compassion and stubborn determination. Those who knew Emma described her as principled to a fault, a quality that had cost her the prestigious position at Westlake Veterinary Clinic after she questioned certain practices involving research animals. The 2 German shepherds now occupied Emma's spare bedroom, converted to a makeshift recovery room. Hunter, as she'd named the male, rarely left Bella's side. His loyalty was unlike anything Emma had witnessed in 15 years of veterinary practice. When she changed Bella's bandages, Hunter watched with an intensity that seemed almost human. When Bella whimpered in pain, he'd gently nudge her face with his nose. Most strikingly, he refused to eat unless Bella was fed first, even in her sedated state. Jason Miller had arrived the morning after Emma took in the dogs, a former Army medic with a graying beard and quiet demeanor. Jason ran a small animal rescue outside town. "These aren't strays," he'd said immediately, noting their muscular builds despite the injuries. "These dogs were purpose-bred and trained." Sheriff Mike Thompson had dismissed Emma's concerns when she called, suggesting the dogs probably escaped from a local breeder. But Emma had seen the surgical scars beneath their fur too precise, too numerous to be routine. And then there was Dr. Richard Westlake, brilliant scientist, respected philanthropist, the man who had adopted Emma after her parents died, the man whose company was somehow connected to these injured animals. The man who had no idea his daughter had just stumbled onto something that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her family and her hometown. Emma still recalled the moment she'd found them with perfect clarity. The male German shepherd had planted himself in the center of County Road 16, forcing cars to slow or swerve around him. Some drivers honked angrily. Others simply accelerated past. But the dog remained, barking desperately at each vehicle. When Emma pulled her faded blue pickup onto the shoulder, hazards blinking, the shepherd had approached cautiously, eyes never leaving hers. Then he'd turned, glancing back as if to say, "Follow me," before racing toward the drainage ditch. "Oh, God," Emma had whispered when she spotted the female shepherd. Blood matted the dog's golden-brown fur, and her breathing came in shallow, ragged gasps. Deep lacerations crossed her abdomen and right flank, not random wounds, but precise, intentional cuts that Emma recognized from her surgical training. The female's back legs splayed at unnatural angles, suggesting potential spinal damage. Most disturbing were the small, circular burns dotting her shoulders and neck marks, consistent with electrode placement. As a veterinarian, Emma had seen animals injured in fights, hit by cars, even abused by owners, but this was something else entirely. "It's okay, girl. I'm going to help you," Emma had murmured, careful not to make sudden movements. The male shepherd stood protective watch, his amber eyes tracking Emma's every gesture. When she'd reached into her truck for the emergency medical kit, he'd growled low in his throat until she showed him her hands again. "I'm a friend," she'd said, not caring how foolish it might seem to reason with a dog. "She needs help right now." Remarkably, the male had seemed to understand. He'd nudged his companion's face once, gently, before stepping back to give Emma access, using a folded blanket as a makeshift stretcher. Emma had managed to slide the wounded female into her truck bed. The male had jumped in without prompting, positioning himself protectively beside his partner for the tense drive to Emma's cabin on the outskirts of town. Emma's first call had been to Oak Ridge Animal Hospital, where she'd once been on staff before joining Westlake Clinic. Dr. Patterson's response had been immediate and unequivocal. "Emma, we can't treat those animals without payment authorization or owner consent. Those are the rules. They're dying, Jeff. The female won't last the night without surgery. Then take them to the shelter, or call animal control." Emma had known what that meant: euthanasia for the critically injured female, an uncertain fate for the male. "I'll handle it myself," she'd said, hanging up before Dr. Patterson could object. Her cabin's dining room became an operating theater. Emma had supplies from her home visits to rural farms, enough anesthetic, antibiotics, and surgical tools for emergency intervention. What she lacked in equipment, she made up for with skill honed through years of practice. The male shepherd had watched the entire 4-hour procedure from the corner, never making a sound, his eyes never leaving his companion. By morning, the female, whom Emma started calling Bella, had stabilized, though her prognosis remained guarded. The male, now Hunter in Emma's mind, had finally collapsed from exhaustion beside Bella's makeshift recovery bed, his own wounds still untreated. Only when Emma approached with antiseptic and bandages did she realize the extent of his injuries: deep puncture wounds on his shoulders, a partially healed surgical incision along his spine, and most tellingly, a small patch of shaved fur with a distinctive tattoo WR42 on his inner thigh. Emma had seen similar tattoos before. During her brief tenure at Westlake's Veterinary Division, Research Subject Identifiers. That discovery had been her first inkling that these weren't ordinary abandoned dogs. The second came when Hunter, despite his injuries, managed to retrieve Bella's water dish when it was empty, carrying it carefully to Emma before returning to his vigilant post. Such behavior indicated training far beyond standard obedience, the kind of specialized training that cost thousands of dollars. As Emma changed Bella's IV bag on that third morning, she noticed something else, a slight protrusion beneath the skin near the dog's shoulder blade. Using a handheld scanner borrowed from Jason's rescue, she confirmed her suspicion a microchip. But unlike the standard identification chips routinely implanted in pets, this one was larger, implanted deeper, and when the scanner read its data, the information displayed made Emma's blood run cold. Property of Westlake Research, Project Canine, Subject W7B, unauthorized access prohibited. Emma sat back on her heels, the implications washing over her. Westlake Research didn't keep animals on site. They contracted with testing facilities in other states, or so her father had always claimed. Yet here was undeniable evidence connecting these injured dogs directly to his company. Whatever had happened to Hunter, and Bella wasn't an accident or random abuse. It was systematic, sanctioned, and somehow her adoptive father was involved. The microchip discovery sent Emma's mind racing back to the operating table. She'd been forced to make a 2-inch incision to remove it far deeper than any standard pet identification chip. Under her desk lamp, she examined the tiny device, no larger than a grain of rice, but somehow more ominous than its size suggested. The Westlake Research logo was unmistakable, etched into the casing alongside a serial number. Emma placed it in a small evidence bag, hands trembling slightly. Whatever these dogs had endured, this chip was concrete proof of Westlake's involvement. Jason arrived shortly after noon, his ancient pickup rattling up Emma's gravel driveway. He carried a cardboard box filled with donated medicines and supplies from his rescue network. His face darkened when Emma showed him the microchip. "I've seen this before," he said quietly. The afternoon light through the kitchen window accentuated the lines on his weathered face. "Last summer, I found a German Shepherd collapsed near Miller's Creek. Similar surgical scars, same breed, same exhausted but highly trained behavior. She had a tumor the size of a baseball in her abdomen. By the time I got her to a vet, it was too late." "Did you report it?" Emma asked. Jason's laugh was hollow. "To who?" "Sheriff Thompson. I tried. He said without evidence of who the dog belonged to, there was nothing to investigate." He looked through the doorway to where Hunter sat vigilant beside Bella's bed. That dog had the same tattoo, different number, but identical placement. "I took photos." He pulled out his phone, scrolling to an image of a black German Shepherd's inner thigh, clearly showing WR39 in the same distinctive font as Hunter's tattoo. "I started asking questions around town, got shut down everywhere. 3 weeks later, someone broke into the rescue, stole nothing but my camera and computer." The message was pretty clear. Emma felt a chill despite the warm spring day. Why German Shepherds specifically? I wonder, intelligence, trainability, loyalty, strength. Military and police have used them for decades. Jason's voice carried the authority of his Army background. Whatever Westlake is doing, they chose the breed deliberately. The conversation was interrupted by Hunter's sudden alert barking. Through the front window, Emma spotted Sheriff Mike Thompson's patrol car pulling into her driveway. Hunter positioned himself between the approaching officer and the room where Bella lay. Sheriff Thompson had been Oak Ridge's law enforcement for nearly 15 years. A tall man with a perpetually sunburned face and the practiced, neutral expression of someone who'd seen it all. Emma had known him since high school. He'd played poker with her father monthly for years. "Got a report about injured animals," he said without preamble when Emma opened the door. "Thought I'd check if you needed animal control." His eyes moved past her to Hunter, who maintained a low growl. "That dog doesn't seem friendly." "He's protective, not aggressive," Emma replied. "And the animals are receiving appropriate veterinary care." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Heard you were doing some independent practice since leaving the clinic. Just be careful, you know how Richard feels about unauthorized treatments." The casual mention of her adoptive father carried an unmistakable warning. These dogs were deliberately injured. Mike. They have identification connecting them directly to Westlake Research. Something flickered in the sheriff's eyes, concern or caution. Emma couldn't tell which. "That's a serious accusation against the town's biggest employer." "Do you have proof?" Emma hesitated, the evidence bag with the microchip suddenly heavy in her pocket. Something in the sheriff's tone made her wary. "I'm gathering documentation. These aren't random strays." "Well?" The sheriff adjusted his belt. "Just remember that making false claims about research practices can have legal consequences. Richard wouldn't want to see you in that kind of trouble." His gaze drifted to Jason, then back to Emma. "Some friendly advice: don't go looking for problems where there might not be any." After the sheriff left, Jason's expression was grim. "He's warning you off." "He's doing his job," Emma replied, but without conviction. The mention of her father had felt deliberate, a reminder of family loyalty expectations. She thought back to her last days at Westlake Clinic before her termination. She'd noticed discrepancies in the medication inventory, particularly drugs used for pain management and neurological research. When she'd questioned her supervisor, the response had been immediate reassignment to routine pet care, away from the research wing. 2 weeks later, she was let go for not being a team player. "I need to talk to my father," she decided aloud. "If Westlake Research is conducting unauthorized animal testing, he should know." Jason's eyebrows rose. "And if he already knows?" The question hung between them, uncomfortable but necessary. Emma had no answer. Dr. Richard Westlake's office occupied the top floor of Westlake Research's main building, with panoramic views of the mountains that had given the company its logo. At 67, he remained imposing, silver-haired, immaculately dressed, with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to respect. When his assistant ushered Emma in, he rose from behind his desk with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Emma, what a surprise. I thought you were still settling into your new role at the shelter." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "How can I help you?" Emma remained standing. "I found 2 German shepherds with Westlake Research identification markers. They've been severely injured surgical experimentation, by the look of it." Her father's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened almost imperceptibly on his pen. "That sounds concerning. Where are these animals now?" "Safe," Emma replied, studying his reaction. "Dad, what is Project K9? For a brief moment, Richard Westlake looked genuinely startled. Then his face settled into the professionally concerned expression Emma recognized from company press conferences. "I'm not familiar with that designation. We have several research initiatives with various code names." "Don't lie to me," Emma said quietly. "These dogs have been cut open, experimented on, and dumped. They have your company's chips implanted in them. This isn't about corporate confidentiality, it's about animal cruelty." Dr. Westlake sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 67 years. "Emma, there are aspects of pharmaceutical research that are necessarily confidential. Not because they're unethical, but because they're proprietary." He leaned forward. "If you found animals with our markers, they should be returned to the facility. We'll ensure they receive appropriate care, like the care that left one of them barely alive." Emma felt her voice rising. "I trusted you. I came to work here because I believed in what you were building. And I'm disappointed that your first assumption is that I'm involved in something nefarious." Her father's voice grew cold. "Return the animals, Emma, as corporate property. Keeping them could be construed as theft." Emma stared at the man who had raised her since she was 10 years old, searching for some sign of the father she thought she knew. Finding none, she turned toward the door. "I'll need to see documentation proving these experiments are legally approved." "Emma!" Her father's voice stopped her. "Some paths are better left unexplored, for everyone's sake." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a warning. The abandoned testing facility stood 3 miles beyond the Westlake Research main campus, hidden behind a stand of ponderosa pines and secured by a rusted chain-link fence. According to Jason, who'd heard rumors from former Westlake employees, the building had been decommissioned 5 years ago when the company expanded its main research wing. Official records listed it as a storage facility for outdated equipment. Emma parked her truck well off the access road, and they approached on foot through the underbrush. Hunter had insisted on coming. There was no better word for it, refusing to enter the truck until Emma relented. Now the German shepherd moved ahead of them with purpose, his posture alert but not fearful. "He's been here before," Jason observed, watching Hunter navigate the terrain with familiarity. The facility itself was smaller than Emma had expected, a squat, concrete building with few windows and a loading dock on its eastern side. Nothing about its exterior suggested its former purpose, except the heavy-duty ventilation systems on the roof and the remains of what appeared to be outdoor kennels, now overgrown with weeds. "Security cameras?" Emma asked, scanning the perimeter. Jason pointed to empty brackets where equipment had once been mounted. "Removed. But let's be quick anyway." The padlock on the side entrance had been broken long ago, possibly by local teenagers looking for a place to drink undisturbed. The door opened with a protesting groan. Hunter hesitated at the threshold, his ears flattened against his skull, before reluctantly following them inside. The interior smelled of mildew and abandonment. Their flashlight beams cut through dust-filled air, revealing hallways lined with empty offices and what had once been laboratory spaces. Most equipment had been removed, leaving behind only bolted-down counters and the occasional broken cabinet. "Records room should be at the administrative end," Jason said, leading them down a corridor where faded signs still indicated department locations. The file room, when they found it, had been largely emptied, but the haste of the evacuation had left scattered papers and forgotten folders. Emma and Jason worked methodically, examining anything that might reference the mysterious Project K9 or explain what had happened to Hunter and Bella. "Look at this," Jason called from a corner where he'd been prying open a filing cabinet with a screwdriver. He held up a water-damaged folder labeled Behavioral Assessments Phase 2. Inside were observation notes on German shepherds identified only by codes WR27 through WR50. Emma scanned the documents, her veterinary training allowing her to interpret the clinical language. "These are pain response tests," she said quietly. They were evaluating how long the dogs could perform tasks while experiencing various levels of discomfort. The clinical detachment of the notes made her stomach turn. Hunter is WR42. There's data on him here. Subject shows exceptional problem-solving capabilities even under stress stimuli. Maintains focus on primary objective despite pain induction at level 3. Recommend advancing to paired testing with subject W7B to evaluate protective response patterns. W7B is Bella's code, Emma realized. They were specifically testing them together. Hunter, who had been investigating the room on his own, suddenly froze. His ears perked forward, and he turned toward the hallway with intense focus. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "Someone's coming," Jason whispered, already gathering their findings. But Hunter wasn't growling at the hallway. He was focused on the far wall of the records room, where a heavy metal door stood partially concealed behind empty shelving units. Before Emma could stop him, Hunter rushed to the door, scratching insistently at its base and whining with increasing urgency. "What is it, boy?" Emma approached cautiously, playing her flashlight over the door. Unlike the others in the facility, this one had a modern keypad lock that still showed an active green light. "This is still powered. The rest of the building has no electricity. But this door has active security." Jason joined her, examining the keypad. "Military grade," he noted. "Whatever's behind there, they don't want anyone finding it." Hunter's whining intensified, becoming almost frantic. He pawed at the bottom of the door, then looked at Emma with what she could only describe as desperate pleading. "There's something or someone in there," Emma said, "but we need a code." Jason studied the keypad. 6 digits, from the wear patterns, and I'd bet it's related to the project. He thought for a moment. "Try 226453. "What's that?" "CANINE on a phone keypad." The light remained red. Hunter's anxiety was becoming unbearable to watch. "Wait," Emma said, remembering the file notation. "Try 427723. "What's that? WR42 and W7B combined?" The keypad emitted a soft beep, and the light turned green. The heavy door unlocked with an audible click. The stench hit them first: urine, feces, and the unmistakable odor of animals in distress. Hunter pushed past them into the darkness beyond. When Emma followed with her flashlight, what she saw staggered her. A row of kennels lined each wall of the windowless room, most containing German shepherds in various states of neglect. Some cowered at the back of their cages. Others rushed forward, barking desperately. All showed signs of experimentation similar to Hunter and Bella surgical scars, shaved patches, monitoring ports implanted beneath their skin. "My God," Jason breathed beside her. "They just left them here." An automated system still provided minimal food and water, explaining how the dogs had survived, but the neglect was evident: matted fur, untreated wounds, the psychological damage of prolonged isolation. Emma counted 12 dogs in total, each bearing a tattoo and microchip similar to Hunter's. Hunter himself moved purposefully to a kennel at the far end, where a black German shepherd lay motionless except for the shallow rise and fall of its rib cage. The dog was emaciated, its coat dull, eyes sunken. A feeding tube had dislodged from its automated system, explaining the animal's deteriorated state compared to the others. "We need to get them all out," Emma said, already examining the kennel locks. "We'll use my truck for the critical cases. Call in the rescue network for the others." "Emma," Jason's voice was cautious, "this is breaking and entering, plus theft of research animals. If your father decides to press charges, these aren't research animals anymore." Emma cut him off. "They've been abandoned to die. That's criminal neglect, and it supersedes any property claims Westlake might make." She met his gaze steadily. "Are you with me or not?" Jason's answer was to pull out his phone. "I'll call the rescue network. We'll need transport, supplies, temporary housing, but Emma—" His expression was grave. "This makes us targets. Whoever left these dogs here never intended for them to be found. Emma's modest cabin couldn't accommodate 12 traumatized German shepherds. So Jason had activated his rescue network, a loose coalition of animal lovers across 3 counties who could provide temporary safe houses. By nightfall, all the dogs had been relocated except for the most critical cases, which Emma kept for immediate veterinary care. Hunter had refused to leave the black shepherd they'd found nearly starved. The dog whom Emma now called Shadow required intensive rehydration and careful refeeding. Throughout the treatment, Hunter remained beside the makeshift bed, occasionally licking Shadow's face in what seemed like encouragement. "I've never seen anything like it," Emma told Jason as they watched from the doorway. "It's as if he understands exactly what each dog needs." A flash of memory from her Westlake days surfaced a restricted wing she'd glimpsed only once, where behavioral researchers worked with exceptional canine subjects. She'd assumed it was advanced service dog training, but now a more disturbing possibility emerged. What if the experiments weren't just about drug testing? She wondered aloud. What if they were enhancing natural canine abilities somehow? Hunter's behavior goes beyond standard training. Jason considered this. The military has invested millions in working dog programs, enhanced scent detection, intuitive problem solving, improved communication with handlers. Those capabilities would be invaluable in combat situations. Emma thought of the notes they'd found. The pain tolerance testing makes sense if they were developing dogs that could continue missions despite injury. She watched Hunter gently nudge a water bowl closer to Shadow. But there's more to it. The way these dogs interact, the way Hunter communicates, it's beyond anything I've seen in 15 years of veterinary practice. Later that evening, as Emma reviewed the documents they'd salvaged, a particular notation caught her attention. Cross-integration between subjects shows promising results. WR42 demonstrates unprecedented empathetic response to W7B's distress signals. Chemical markers indicate potential transference mechanism requiring further study. Emma was still puzzling over this when headlights swept across her front window. Setting aside the papers, she peered outside to see Sheriff Thompson's patrol car parking beside Jason's truck. Hunter immediately moved to the window, his posture alert but not aggressive. "Stay here," Emma told Jason, who was helping change Bella's bandages. "Let me handle this." Sheriff Thompson stood on her porch, his expression unreadable in the porch light's glow. Behind him, another patrol car waited at the end of her driveway. "Evening, Emma," he said, removing his hat. "Got a call from Westlake Security about a break-in at one of their storage facilities." His eyes flickered past her to the interior of the cabin. "Thought I should check in, see if you knew anything about that." Emma maintained a neutral expression. "I've been here all day, Mike, treating these injured animals, as you can see." "Funny coincidence." "Then," the sheriff said, "that shortly after this break-in, several German shepherds were reported being transported across county lines, dogs matching the description of ones reportedly stolen from Westlake Research. Abandoned, Emma corrected. Those animals were left to die in locked kennels with inadequate care. As a veterinarian, I'm mandated to report animal cruelty. And as sheriff, I'm mandated to investigate theft of corporate property, Thompson countered. His voice lowered. Emma, you're forcing my hand here. Dr. Westlake has filed official charges. He's claiming proprietary research subjects were taken. They're living beings, Mike, not lab equipment. The sheriff sighed heavily. I've known you since you were a kid. I don't want to see you in jail. Whatever you found, whatever you think you know, it's not worth ruining your life over. Isn't it? Emma challenged. What about the lives of these dogs? What about the ethics of what's happening at Westlake? Thompson glanced back at the second patrol car, then leaned closer. Listen carefully. I can't ignore a direct complaint from the town's biggest employer, but I can give you time, 24 hours. Get your evidence in order. Find somewhere secure for these animals. And prepare for legal battle. His expression softened slightly. Richard Westlake has powerful friends. Emma, make sure whatever you're doing is worth the cost. With that warning delivered, he returned to his official tone. I'll need to search the premises. Dr. Whitfield. Standard procedure for a theft report. Emma stepped aside, allowing him entry. As expected, the sheriff conducted a cursory inspection, deliberately avoiding the back room where several rescued dogs were being treated. He made a show of taking notes, asked a few perfunctory questions, and departed with a final, meaningful glance that Emma understood perfectly the official visit had been for show. But his warning was genuine. After the patrol cars left, Jason emerged from the back room. He's giving us a head start. But why? Emma wondered. Mike's been on my father's payroll for years. Maybe he has a conscience, Jason suggested. Or maybe there's more to this story than we know. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Sarah Parker, reporter for the Oak Ridge Gazette, knocked on Emma's door just after sunrise. A petite woman with prematurely gray hair and the intense focus of a career journalist. Sarah had been investigating Westlake research for years, though with little success. I heard about the raid on the old facility, she said without preamble when Emma answered. I have sources inside Westlake. They say you found abandoned research subjects. Emma hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. What exactly do you know about Project Canine? Sarah's eyes lit with recognition. Enough to know it's worth risking my career to expose. May I come in? I think we can help each other. Inside, Sarah revealed what her investigation had uncovered. Westlake Research had secured a classified military contract 3 years earlier for developing enhanced battlefield assets, a euphemism for dogs with heightened capabilities for combat and reconnaissance. The project had started with humane training methods, but had progressively incorporated more invasive techniques under pressure to show results. My source claims they've been testing increasingly aggressive neurological stimulation, Sarah explained, pushing the dogs beyond normal capabilities, then documenting the results. Those that couldn't perform to standard were... She trailed off, looking at Hunter, who sat alert nearby. Discarded, Emma finished. But why abandon them in that facility? Why not simply euthanize them if they were failed experiments? Because officially, that facility doesn't exist anymore, Sarah replied. The permissions for animal testing were never filed for that location. If inspectors found research subjects there, Westlake would face federal charges, So they just left them to die slowly, where no one would find them, Jason said, disgust evident in his voice. Except Hunter found a way out, Emma realized. And instead of just escaping, he went back for Bella. She looked at the German Shepherd with newfound respect. He wasn't running away. He was trying to rescue her. Sarah nodded. My source mentioned one dog in particular that showed exceptional problem-solving abilities. They called it the empath, because it seemed to understand and respond to the emotions of other test subjects. Hunter's ears perked up at the word empath, his intelligent eyes fixed on Sarah with unnerving intensity. I've been trying to expose Westlake for years, Sarah continued, but I've never had concrete evidence. These dogs, your documentation, the facility itself, it could finally bring accountability. At considerable risk, Jason pointed out. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar company with government contracts and political connections. And we have 24 hours before the sheriff can no longer look the other way, Emma added. Explaining Thompson's warning, Sarah considered this. Then we need to work quickly. I have contacts at regional news outlets who can break the story simultaneously, too many sources for Westlake to silence. But first, we need irrefutable evidence connecting these dogs directly to approved experiments at the main facility. The microchips prove ownership, Emma said, but not the nature of the experiments. We need internal documentation. Sarah agreed. Research protocols, approval forms, progress reports, anything showing what was really happening to these animals. Emma thought of her father's office at the top of Westlake's main building, with its secure files and computer access to the company's entire research database. I might know where to look, she said slowly. But getting in won't be easy. Hunter, who had been listening to their conversation with apparent understanding, suddenly stood and moved to the door, looking back at them expectantly. I think, Jason said, watching the dog's deliberate behavior, we might have an unexpected ally in our planning. Westlake Research's main laboratory complex gleamed in the moonlight, its glass and steel facade projecting an aura of clinical sterility. Emma surveyed the building from the tree line, heart pounding against her ribs. She'd worked here for nearly 2 years, knew its layout intimately, yet tonight the facility seemed foreign and forbidding. Jason crouched beside her, checking the time. Security does rounds every 30 minutes, he whispered. We've got a 15-minute window once they pass the west entrance. The plan was audacious but simple. Emma would use her still-active employee ID to access the research wing. Apparently, her father had never bothered to deactivate it after her termination, while Jason created a diversion at the opposite end of the complex. Sarah waited half a mile away in her car, ready for a quick escape if needed, with Hunter sitting vigilant in the passenger seat. Despite Emma's insistence that he stay behind, the German Shepherd had planted himself by the car door and refused to move until they relented. This is breaking at least a dozen laws, Emma murmured, adjusting the small backpack that contained camera, flash drives, and tools for accessing locked cabinets. So is what they're doing to those dogs, Jason replied. His military experience showed in his calm efficiency, the way he continually scanned their surroundings for threats. The security guard's flashlight beam swept across the parking lot, followed by the guard himself, a middle-aged man ambling along his routine patrol. Once he disappeared around the building's corner. Jason nodded. Now? They moved swiftly across the open ground. Keeping low, Emma swiped her ID at the side entrance, holding her breath until the light flashed green and the door clicked open. The familiar antiseptic smell of the research facility enveloped her as they slipped inside. "Basement-level houses the current animal subjects," Emma whispered. "Dad's office is on the top floor. Which first?" Jason hesitated only a moment. "Animals? Documentation won't help them if they're dead or destroyed before we can expose this." The service elevator required another ID swipe. As they descended to the basement, Emma felt a strange duality. This had once been her workplace, a source of pride. Now she moved through it like an intruder, hyper-aware of cameras tracking their movement. Jason had assured her that most security footage was only reviewed if an alarm was triggered, but every passing second still felt dangerous. The basement corridor stretched before them, brightly lit and silent, except for the soft hum of ventilation systems. Unlike the abandoned facility, everything here was immaculate polished floors, state-of-the-art equipment visible through observation windows, a control room monitoring vital signs from unseen subjects. There, Emma pointed to a set of double doors marked "Large Animal Research. Authorized personnel only." "That's the primary canine holding area." The doors opened to a large room divided into individual kennels, each a sterile white enclosure with a glass front for observation. Inside each, a German Shepherd lay on a platform, connected to monitoring equipment via ports implanted along their spines. Some paced restlessly, others lay motionless, staring with vacant expressions at nothing. "Jesus," Jason breathed. "There must be 20 dogs here." Emma moved to the nearest kennel, examining the dog inside. Unlike Hunter and Bella, these animals appeared physically healthy, well-fed, groomed, free from obvious injuries. But their psychological state was another matter. The dog closest to her showed clear signs of learned helplessness, a condition where animals subjected to inescapable pain eventually stop trying to avoid it. When she approached the glass, he didn't react. Didn't even meet her eyes. "They're drugged," she realized, noticing the automated medication dispensers attached to each kennel. Kept compliant for whatever tests they're running. Jason had found the central control panel. "What's the plan? We can't exactly walk out with 20 German Shepherds." "Evidence first," Emma decided, removing her phone to document everything. "Then we'll see if we can disable the medication systems, at least give them a chance to recover before we can get proper help." As she photographed each dog, each equipment setup, each monitoring station, Emma felt cold fury building within her. These were the successful subjects, the ones that had passed whatever cruel tests had left Hunter and Bella so damaged, the ones her father had deemed valuable enough to keep. A door at the far end of the room suddenly opened, flooding the area with brighter light. Emma and Jason ducked behind a supply cabinet as a lab-coated technician entered, clipboard in hand, apparently conducting a routine overnight check. They held their breath as the young man moved methodically from kennel to kennel, noting readings without so much as a glance at the animals themselves. When he finally left, Jason emerged from hiding. "We need to move faster. I'll set up the diversion in 10 minutes. That's all the time you'll have to check your father's office." The executive floor was accessed by a separate elevator requiring higher security clearance. Emma held her breath as she swiped her ID, relieved when the display indicated access granted. Her father's trust, or perhaps his arrogance, had left her permissions intact. Dr. Richard Westlake's office occupied the building's northeast corner, providing panoramic views of the mountains and the town beyond. Emma had spent countless hours here as a teenager, doing homework while her father finished just one more report. The familiar scent of his sandalwood cologne still lingered in the air. She moved directly to his computer, relieved to find it unlocked. Senior executives often left their systems running overnight for scheduled maintenance. The screen displayed a standard desktop with dozens of folders neatly organized. Emma plugged in her flash drive and began searching for anything related to Project K9. The first files she found were disappointing sanitized progress reports, redacted experimental protocols, nothing that couldn't be explained away as standard pharmaceutical research. Then she found a folder labeled K9 DoD Reports and began copying its contents. Military contract details, performance metrics, comparative analyses of subjects, all damning in their clinical detachment from the suffering involved. A subfolder caught her attention. Genetic Integration Analysis. Inside were detailed studies of how certain genetic markers affected performance, resilience, and empathetic capabilities. One document specifically referenced human canine genetic compatibility testing, with a list of DNA samples used. Emma scanned the document, then froze when she saw her own name. Sample EW17 continues to show highest compatibility markers. Subject WR42 derived from this lineage demonstrates exceptional cognitive emotional capabilities, particularly in paired scenarios. Her hands trembled as the implication became clear. Her father had used her DNA, her genetic material, in developing these dogs. Hunter's remarkable abilities, his connection to Bella, his almost human understanding, they were partially derived from Emma's own genetic profile. The betrayal struck like a physical blow. Her adoption at age 10 hadn't been an act of love, but of scientific opportunity, a genetically compatible subject to further his research. Every memory of their relationship suddenly seemed suspect, every moment of apparent affection potentially calculated. A notification appeared on the computer screen. Security alert. West Wing breach. Jason had triggered his diversion. Emma had minutes at most before the building went into lockdown. She continued copying files frantically, uncovering more disturbing details, plans for decommissioning the abandoned facility dogs, schedules for removing evidence before an upcoming FDA inspection, emails confirming her father's direct knowledge of the abandoned animals. It was all there, the calculated cruelty, the corporate cover-up, the years of systematic abuse in pursuit of military contracts worth hundreds of millions. The final document she discovered was the most damning, a signed order from Dr. Westlake himself, dated just 2 days earlier. Terminate all Phase 1 and 2 subjects immediately. Sanitize Site B completely. Prepare documentation showing humane euthanasia protocols. FDA inspectors arrive Monday. A sudden noise from the outer office jolted Emma from her horrified reading. She grabbed the flash drive, pocketing it just as the office door opened to reveal her father standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of disappointment and cold anger. "I had hoped it wouldn't come to this," Dr. Westlake said, stepping into the room. Behind him stood 2 security guards. "Breaking into private property, stealing corporate information, this is far beyond workplace disagreement." Emma backed away, putting the desk between them. "Using my genetic material without consent, abandoning dogs to die slowly in locked kennels, that's far beyond unethical research." "Dad." Something flickered in Richard Westlake's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or simply calculation. Those animals represent millions in research investment and national security implications you can't begin to understand. Your bleeding heart has always been your weakness, and your complete lack of one has always been yours, Emma replied, feeling a strange calm settle over her despite the danger. Those dogs aren't research equipment. They feel pain, fear, loyalty, everything you seem incapable of feeling. Dr. Westlake sighed. I've already called Sheriff Thompson. He's on his way to arrest you for industrial espionage and theft. Whatever you think you've discovered tonight will be dismissed as the desperate accusations of a disgruntled former employee. As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Red emergency lights cast an eerie glow across the office. That's not Jason's diversion, Emma realized aloud, seeing confusion cross her father's face as well. One of the security guards pressed a hand to his earpiece. Sir, we have multiple breaches. Someone's released the research subjects in the basement. He paused, listening. They're heading for the exits, sir. All of them. A flicker of genuine fear passed across Dr. Westlake's face. Secure them immediately. Use the emergency sedation protocol if necessary. The guard was already shaking his head. Systems not responding, sir. Someone's overridden the central controls. Emma felt a surge of hope, thinking of Jason's military background and technical skills. But her father's next words erased that assumption. Check the security cameras, he ordered sharply. Find out who's helping her. The second guard pulled up the security feed on his tablet, then stared in disbelief. Sir, you need to see this. He turned the screen, showing footage from the basement level. The kennel door stood open, and moving purposefully among the confused German shepherds was a familiar figure, Hunter, somehow inside the facility, systematically guiding the other dogs toward the emergency exit. The county jail cell was cold and impersonal, its gray walls a stark contrast to the warm wood tones of Emma's cabin. She sat on the thin mattress, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, now rumpled and dirty from her arrest. Sheriff Thompson had been professional but unyielding, reading her rights as he placed her in handcuffs outside Westlake Research. The charges were serious breaking and entering, corporate espionage, theft of research animals, destruction of private property. Bail had been set at $75,000, far beyond her means. Emma leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. She had no idea what had happened to Jason after the alarm sounded, the last she'd seen. He was being pursued by security personnel near the loading docks. Somehow, Hunter had found his way into the facility, a feat that still bewildered her and orchestrated what the local paper was already calling the Great Shepherd Escape. 23 German shepherds had disappeared into the night, evading the hastily assembled search teams. But what haunted Emma most was Bella. The injured female shepherd had been left at Emma's cabin, too weak to move, with only Sarah Parker checking in on her. Would the journalist remember the strict feeding schedule, the medications, the wound care routine that kept infection at bay? Each hour that passed in the cell increased Emma's anxiety for the dog she'd fought so hard to save. A guard appeared at the cell door. Visitor? Whitfield? Emma expected Jason or Sarah, perhaps with news about the escaped dogs. Instead, Richard Westlake stepped into view, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. He nodded to the guard. 15 minutes, please. They regarded each other in silence, adopted daughter and father, now adversaries. Emma noted the dark circles under his eyes, the deeper lines around his mouth. He'd aged overnight. "I'm told you haven't called a lawyer yet," he finally said, remaining standing despite the chair provided. "I haven't decided whether to fight or simply expose everything," Emma replied. "I have copies of those files. Dad, Sarah has them now. If anything happens to me, they go public." It was a bluff. She had no idea if Jason had escaped with the flash drive or if it had been confiscated during her arrest. But Richard's momentary flicker of concern suggested the threat carried weight. "This isn't how I wanted things to play out," he said, his voice softer than she expected. "You were never supposed to be involved in the research aspects. The veterinary position was meant to keep you connected to the company, but separate from certain divisions." "Is that supposed to comfort me? That you planned my entire career to keep me in the dark about your torture chambers?" Emma felt her composure slipping. Those animals, they were suffering. Hunter and Bella nearly died. WR-42 and W7B, her father corrected automatically, then sighed at Emma's disgusted expression. "You've always anthropomorphized animals, given them names, personalities, human emotions. It's what made you an excellent veterinarian but unsuitable for research." "They're not just test subjects," Emma insisted. "Hunter organized an escape. He went back for the others. He's been caring for Bella since I found them." Richard Westlake's expression hardened. "You're describing conditioned responses and pack behavior in clinical terms. WR-42 was bred and trained for problem-solving and leadership functions. Nothing more. You used my DNA." The accusation hung between them, unavoidable now. "You used me." For the first time, genuine regret crossed Richard's face. "It wasn't like that, not initially. When I adopted you, it was because I saw myself in you, your intelligence, your focus. The genetic sampling came later, after we discovered certain markers that enhanced the empathetic capabilities we were developing. So I wasn't just a prop for your public image. I was a genetic donor." Emma felt physically ill. "Did you ever actually care about me at all?" "Of course I did. I still do." Richard took a step closer to the bars. "That's why I'm here, Emma, to offer you a way out. The charges will be dropped if you sign a non-disclosure agreement and return all research materials. You'll receive a generous settlement, enough to start over somewhere else. And the dogs, what happens to them?" Her father's hesitation told her everything. "You'd still destroy them," she realized. "Erase the evidence before the FDA inspection." "There are national security implications you don't understand," Richard insisted. "The research has applications beyond animal welfare, beyond basic ethics." Emma stood, approaching the bars. "Those dogs feel pain. They form bonds. They care for each other. Hunter went back for Bella when he could have just saved himself. What does that tell you about your research subjects?" Richard studied her for a long moment. "It tells me the programming was more successful than we anticipated." Emma recoiled as if struck. "Programming? That's all you see? Isn't it? Not lives, not suffering, just data points and results." "I see the greater good," her father replied evenly. "Advances that could save human lives in combat zones. Capabilities that could prevent terrorist attacks. Applications that extend far beyond a handful of test animals. At what cost your humanity mine?" Emma shook her head. "I won't sign anything. I'd rather stay in this cell." Richard straightened his jacket, mask of corporate efficiency sliding back into place. The offer remains open until noon. After that, the company will pursue maximum penalties. You're looking at years in prison. Emma, think carefully about what you're sacrificing, and for what. After he left, Emma remained standing at the bars, a storm of emotions battling within her. The betrayal cut deeper than she could have imagined. Every childhood memory now felt tainted: the science fair projects he'd helped with, the veterinary school recommendations he'd written, the proud smile at her graduation. Had any of it been genuine? Or was she always just another research asset to him? Hours crawled by. Emma refused the bland jail breakfast, her stomach too knotted with worry for food. She thought of Bella, alone and suffering, of Hunter, his remarkable intelligence now making terrible sense in light of what she'd learned. Of the other dogs, would they survive in the wilderness around Oak Ridge, or would Westlake Security hunt them down? Just before noon, a different visitor arrived: Sarah Parker, looking exhausted but triumphant. "Jason made it out," she said without preamble. "He has the evidence. We're preparing to release everything to media outlets across 3 states simultaneously." Relief flooded through Emma. "And Bella?" "Stable. The medication you left is helping. But she needs you." "Emma, all the dogs do." Sarah lowered her voice. "Hunter came back to your cabin last night. He brought 3 other shepherds with him. They're hiding in the root cellar Jason found under your tool shed." Emma pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "He's gathering them, protecting them." "Exactly. But we need you free to help them." Sarah glanced toward the guard station. "Mike Thompson came by the paper this morning, asked a lot of questions about what we knew, what evidence we had." "I think he's wavering." Before Emma could respond, the cell block door opened again. Sheriff Thompson himself appeared, keys jangling at his belt. His expression was unreadable as he approached Emma's cell. "Dr. Whitfield, I've reviewed the circumstances of your arrest. There appear to be some procedural issues with the warrant execution." He unlocked the cell door. "In light of these concerns, I'm releasing you pending further investigation." Emma exchanged a startled glance with Sarah. "What about the charges?" "Remain in place for now." Thompson's voice remained professionally neutral, but his eyes conveyed a different message. "You're required to stay within county limits and make yourself available for questioning. Your personal effects are at the front desk." As they walked through the station, Emma whispered to Sarah, "What did you say to him?" "Nothing he didn't already know," Sarah replied. "But his canine partner died last week. Sudden kidney failure. Same symptoms reported in some of Westlake's test subjects." Outside the station, Jason waited in Sarah's car, tension visibly leaving his shoulders when he spotted Emma, but the momentary relief was short-lived. As they drove toward Emma's cabin, Jason revealed the full extent of their situation. "Bella's condition is deteriorating," he said quietly. "The antibiotics aren't working anymore. She needs specialized treatment, the kind only available at a fully equipped veterinary hospital." "Or a research laboratory," Emma realized, a cold weight settling in her stomach. "The medication protocols would be at Westlake. They caused this. They'd know how to treat it." "We can't exactly walk back in and ask for help," Sarah pointed out. Emma stared out the window at the passing forest, mind racing through options. "No, but I know someone who might have access to what we need." At the cabin, Emma's heart sank as she knelt beside Bella. The female shepherd's breathing was shallow, her temperature elevated. The surgical wounds that had been healing nicely now showed signs of a resistant infection redness spreading outward. Unusual discharge, the unmistakable odor of compromised tissue. Hunter lay beside her, his head resting gently against her neck. He acknowledged Emma with a glance, but didn't move from his position. In the adjacent room, 3 other shepherds from the laboratory watched warily from the corners, still disoriented from their sudden freedom, but instinctively following Hunter's lead. "She has maybe 24 hours without proper treatment," Emma said after examining Bella thoroughly. "Whatever they did to her, whatever they put inside her, it's causing a systemic reaction now." Jason nodded grimly. "I suspected as much." The other dogs from the abandoned facility showed similar patterns, stable at first, then rapid decline. "But why?" Sarah asked, keeping her distance from the nervous shepherds. "If they're valuable research subjects, why design them to fail this way?" "Insurance," Emma replied bitterly. "If they escaped, they'd eventually die without Westlake's specialized treatment. It ensures no one else can study or replicate their work." She stroked Bella's head gently. "We need those treatment protocols, and I know my father won't provide them willingly." The weight of their situation pressed down on all of them. 20 escaped research subjects, most likely all carrying the same biological time bomb as Bella. Damning evidence that would expose Westlake research but wouldn't save the dogs in time. And at the center of it all, the personal betrayal that Emma was still struggling to process her own DNA used without consent. Her entire relationship with her adoptive father revealed as manipulation. Hunter whined softly, nuzzling Bella as her breathing grew more labored. In that sound, Emma heard everything she needed to know about the moral stakes of their fight. Whatever her father might claim about greater goods or national security, nothing justified the suffering before her. Nothing justified turning loyalty and love qualities Hunter demonstrated so profoundly into experimental variables to be measured and exploited. "We need to move quickly," she decided, rising to her feet. "I'm going to call Dr. Patterson at Oak Ridge Animal Hospital. He may not have agreed to treat them before, but now that we have evidence of what Westlake was doing, he might reconsider." But as Emma reached for her phone, it rang in her hand, a local number she didn't recognize. "Dr. Whitfield. This is Madeline Keyes, your father's assistant." The woman's voice was hushed, urgent. "I don't have much time. Dr. Westlake has ordered emergency protocols for all Project Canine subjects. Any animals returned to the facility are to be euthanized immediately. And," she hesitated, "he's implementing a contingency measure for the escaped subjects. Some kind of remotely triggered drug release through their implants. I thought you should know." The phone went dead in Emma's hand. She looked at Hunter, at Bella, at the other dogs watching her with trusting eyes. The clock that had been ticking since their escape had just accelerated dramatically. "My father," she told Jason and Sarah, her voice hollow, "is going to kill them all. Tonight." The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence, momentarily paralyzing them all. Emma recovered first, veterinary training kicking in to override emotional shock. "The microchips," she said, already moving toward her medical supplies. "They must contain some kind of medication reservoir, probably triggered remotely or on a timer. We need to remove them immediately." Jason helped her gather surgical tools while Sarah kept watch by the window, wary of Westlake security or sheriff's deputies. The cabin had become a makeshift field hospital, kitchen table cleared for emergency surgery. "Start with Bella," Emma instructed. "She's weakest and can't tolerate additional toxins." She prepared a local anesthetic, knowing full anesthesia would be too risky given Bella's compromised state. Hunter watched intently as Emma located the microchip beneath Bella's skin, larger and more complex than standard identification chips. The removal procedure was delicate. The device had been designed with small, barbed anchors to prevent exactly this kind of extraction. As Emma carefully cut away the surrounding tissue, she noticed a small reservoir attached to the chip, partially filled with amber fluid. "This confirms it," she said grimly. "Delayed-release toxin. My guess is all the escaped dogs have the same implant, programmed to release if they aren't returned to the facility within a certain time frame." One by one, they removed chips from the 4 dogs in the cabin. Each animal seemed to understand the necessity of the painful procedure, remaining still despite minimal sedation. Hunter went last, watching the entire process before allowing Emma to approach him with surgical tools. "How many more are out there?" Sarah asked, looking at the 4 extracted devices laid out on a towel. "At least 19, Jason replied. "And we have no way of finding them all before these chips activate." Emma stared at the microchips, mind racing. "Unless—" She picked up the one removed from Hunter, examining it closely. "These are sophisticated transponders, designed to receive signals from a central system. They must operate on a specific frequency." "So if we could block or interrupt that frequency," Jason began, following her logic, "we could prevent remote activation," Emma finished. "But we'd need to know the exact frequency and have equipment powerful enough to jam it across several square miles." Sarah had been quietly making notes during the procedures. Now she looked up with sudden inspiration. "The radio station, KORC, broadcasts from that tower on Miller's Ridge. Their equipment could transmit a blocking signal if properly calibrated." "Who do you know at the station?" Jason asked. "Ben Mitchell, the night engineer. He owes me a favor after I kept his drunk driving arrest out of the paper last year." Sarah was already reaching for her phone. "But we'd still need the exact frequency these chips operate on." Emma considered this obstacle. That information would be in the research documentation, possibly in the files we copied, but more certainly in the main laboratory's control systems. So we either hope it's in the files we already have, or— Jason let the alternative hang unspoken. "Or someone goes back in," Emma concluded. She glanced at the clock, nearly 4 p.m. "How long before your story breaks?" "Sarah." "Scheduled for the 6 p.m. news cycle across 3 stations, plus online outlets?" "Then Westlake Research has less than 2 hours of normal operations before all hell breaks loose." Emma made her decision. "I'm going back in." Jason immediately protested. "That's suicide. They'll be watching for you." "Not if I walk through the front door." Emma's expression hardened. "My father offered me a deal this morning, drop the charges if I sign a non-disclosure agreement. I'll tell him I'm accepting his terms." "It's too dangerous," Sarah argued. "He'll suspect a trap." "Possibly. But he also desperately wants this to go away quietly." Emma began gathering what she would need. "He won't expect me to risk returning to Westlake property after being arrested there. That's my advantage." While they strategized, Hunter had moved back to Bella's side. The female shepherd seemed marginally better after the chip removal, but still critically ill. She needed specialized treatment beyond what Emma could provide in the cabin. "What about Bella?" Jason asked, nodding toward the injured dog. She needs a hospital." Emma knelt beside the animals, gently stroking Bella's head. "Dr. Patterson at Oak Ridge Animal Hospital might help now that we have concrete evidence." She looked at the other dogs. "Can you handle taking them there while I deal with Westlake?" "Splitting up is dangerous," Jason cautioned. "We don't have a choice," Emma replied. "Bella needs immediate care, and the other escaped dogs need that signal jammed before their chips activate. We have to move on both fronts." The plan came together quickly. Sarah would take Hunter with her to the radio station, believing his presence might help locate other escaped shepherds. Jason would transport Bella and the other 3 dogs to Oak Ridge Animal Hospital, armed with evidence of Westlake's experiments to convince Dr. Patterson to help. Emma would confront her father alone, extracting the frequency information by whatever means necessary, as they prepared to separate. Sheriff Mike Thompson's patrol car appeared on the cabin's dirt driveway. Emma tensed, fearing their plans were about to collapse, but Jason peered through the blinds and shook his head. "He's alone. No backup." When Emma opened the door, the sheriff stood on her porch looking distinctly uncomfortable, hat in his hands. "Dr. Whitfield, may I come in?" She stepped aside, allowing him entry but watching him warily. Thompson surveyed the cabin, the surgical tools, the extracted microchips, the wounded dogs with an unreadable expression. "I had my K-9 partner for 7 years, he said finally. "Rex, German Shepherd, best damn police dog in 3 counties. His voice roughened. "Last week he collapsed during a training exercise. Kidney failure. The vet said nothing they could do." Emma remained silent, sensing there was more. "This morning I requested his medical records. Rex received all his care at Westlake Veterinary Clinic, courtesy of Dr. Westlake's Community Support Program." Thompson's jaw tightened. "His last checkup showed perfect kidney function. 2 weeks later, he's dead." "I'm sorry about Rex," Emma said softly. "When you were arrested, I followed procedure, did my job." Thompson's eyes hardened. "But then I started asking questions. Why was a respected veterinarian breaking into a research facility? What was in the basement level that required such heavy security? Why were search teams combing the woods for escaped research animals?" He reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded paper. "This came across my desk an hour ago. Judicial order to seize all animals removed from Westlake property and return them immediately, citing proprietary research and national security concerns." He placed the paper on Emma's table without unfolding it. "Signed by Judge Harrison, Richard Westlake's golfing buddy." "Are you here to execute that order?" Emma asked quietly. Sheriff Thompson looked at the wounded animals, at the extracted microchips, then back at Emma. "I'm here because I've been a lawman for 22 years. Because I believe in justice, not just law." He touched the sheriff's badge on his chest. "And because I loved my dog." "Whatever's happening here goes beyond corporate rights or trespassing charges." The sheriff's unexpected support shifted their calculations entirely. Within minutes, he was integrated into their plan, offering critical assistance. He would accompany Emma to Westlake Research, his official presence providing both protection and legitimate access. "One condition," Thompson said as they finalized details. "When this is over, I want the truth about what happened to Rex. All of it." Emma nodded solemnly. "You'll have it. I promise." As they prepared to depart, Hunter approached Emma, pressing his body against her leg in what felt unmistakably like reassurance. She knelt, meeting his intelligent gaze. "Find the others," she told him quietly. "Sarah will help you." The German shepherd seemed to understand, touching his nose briefly to her hand before returning to Bella, offering one gentle lick to his partner's face before joining Sarah at the door. Richard Westlake's surprise at seeing his daughter enter his office, flanked by Sheriff Thompson, was quickly masked behind a corporate smile. "Emma, Mike, this is unexpected." He rose from behind his desk, perfectly composed in his tailored suit. "I trust this means you've reconsidered my offer." In a manner of speaking, Emma remained standing, declining his gesture toward the visitor chairs. "I want to make a deal, but not the one you proposed." Her father's expression cooled. "I'm not sure what leverage you believe you have, but—" "Cut the act, Richard," Sheriff Thompson interrupted. "I've seen enough evidence to justify a full investigation into animal cruelty and unethical research practices. The only question is whether that investigation begins with cooperation or search warrants." Dr. Westlake's gaze shifted between them, calculating odds and options with visible precision. "What exactly are you proposing? Treatment protocols for all Project K9 subjects?" Emma stated flatly. "Specifically, the counteragents for the implanted toxins and the chip activation frequency." A flicker of genuine surprise crossed her father's face. "How did you—" He stopped himself. "Those are proprietary medical formulations. Corporate assets worth millions in research investment? Those are living beings suffering from deliberate poisoning," Emma countered. And in less than an hour, Sarah Parker's expose on Westlake research hits media outlets across 3 states. Your choice is simple. Help us save these animals and face the consequences with some shred of decency intact, or obstruct us and add another layer of charges when this goes public. For the first time, uncertainty showed in Richard Westlake's carefully maintained facade. He turned to stare out the wall of windows behind his desk, shoulders rigid with tension. "You don't understand what's at stake," he said finally. "This research has national security implications, military applications that could save American lives." "I understand perfectly," Emma replied. "You justified cruelty by wrapping it in patriotism. You told yourself the ends justified the means. You compartmentalized until you could no longer see the suffering you were causing. These are animals, Emma, not people. Beings capable of pain, fear, loyalty, and love," she corrected. "Hunter went back for Bella when he could have saved himself. He's been gathering the other escaped dogs, protecting them. What does that tell you about your research subjects?" Her father turned back, something like regret briefly visible in his eyes. "It tells me the empathy integration was more successful than we anticipated." "Dad," Emma softened her tone, approaching his desk. "Whatever you've done, whatever lines you've crossed, this is your chance to make one right choice. Help us save them." Sheriff Thompson added his own pressure. "The judicial order on my desk complicates things. Richard, I'm obligated to execute it. Gather these animals and return them to Westlake custody. The question is, what happens to them after that? According to my information, the current protocol calls for immediate termination." Emma watched her father process this implicit threat. If Thompson executed the order by the book, the dogs would be returned to Westlake where they'd face immediate euthanasia. If he delayed or misinterpreted the order, it might buy enough time for treatment and the media exposure to prevent their destruction. After a long moment, Dr. Westlake reached for his computer keyboard. The treatment protocol is complex, specifically tailored to each subject's genetic profile. He began typing, accessing secured files. The primary toxin is a compound designed to cause rapid organ failure approximately 72 hours after the chip reservoir ruptures. The counteragent must be administered within 12 hours of exposure. He turned the monitor so Emma could see the chemical formulations displayed. This can be synthesized by any competent pharmaceutical lab. The base components are commercially available. And the chip frequency, Sheriff Thompson pressed. Doctor. Westlake hesitated, his finger hovering over the keyboard. In that moment of indecision, Emma saw the last internal battle between the scientist who had crossed ethical lines and the father who had once taught her compassion for all living things. 472.86 megahertz, he said finally. The activation signal includes an encrypted authentication code, but simply jamming that frequency would prevent transmission. Emma quickly recorded this information, sensing her father's cooperation might be brief. What about Bella's infection? The surgical sites are deteriorating rapidly. W7B was part of the accelerated healing trials. Dr. Westlake explained, reverting to clinical terminology. The infection is an autoimmune response to the experimental treatments. There's a stabilizing agent in the pharmacology lab, 3rd floor, cold storage unit C. He wrote down a formula on a notepad and handed it to Emma. This will buy you 48 hours. Beyond that, she'll need specialized immunotherapy. As Emma pocketed the vital information, alarms suddenly blared throughout the building. Dr. Westlake glanced at his computer screen, which now displayed security alerts. "It appears your diversion has arrived," he said dryly. Emma exchanged confused looks with Sheriff Thompson. They hadn't planned any diversion. The office door burst open as a security guard rushed in. "Sir, we have multiple breaches at ground level. It's the dogs, they're back." At least a dozen German shepherds are on the property, circling the building. A second guard appeared behind the first. "Sir, reporters are at the main gate. They're asking for comments about animal testing allegations." Dr. Westlake's composed exterior finally cracked. How the story wasn't supposed to break until 6. Sarah moved up the timeline, Emma realized. And Hunter. She trailed off, looking out the window where, sure enough, she could see German shepherds moving purposefully across the manicured grounds of Westlake Research. Hunter was among them, leading what appeared to be a coordinated approach to the facility. Her father followed her gaze, watching the dogs with a mixture of scientific fascination and growing alarm. Remarkable. They're displaying pack coordination far beyond our performance projections. "They're not data points," Emma said quietly. "They're coming for their own." As security personnel scrambled to respond to both the canine incursion and the gathering media presence, Sheriff Thompson placed a hand firmly on Dr. Westlake's shoulder. "I think it's time for a public statement, Richard. One that addresses both your research practices and your plan for making this right." Richard Westlake looked from the sheriff to his daughter, then back to the window where his experiments had returned not as obedient subjects, but as a unified force demanding recognition of their suffering. "It's over, isn't it?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Emma nodded. "Yes, Dad, it's over. The only question is whether you end it with some shred of humanity intact, or whether you force us to do it for you." For the first time in Emma's memory, Her father looked genuinely lost, a man seeing the collapse of everything he had built, everything he had justified to himself through clinical detachment and rationalization. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said softly. "The initial research was humane, but the military contracts demanded results. Faster progress, enhanced capabilities." He looked at Emma, really looked at her perhaps for the first time in years. "I told myself it was for the greater good, that some sacrifices were necessary for advancement." "Start making it right," Emma urged. "Help us save them." 1 year later, Emma stood on the covered porch of the Mountain Haven Sanctuary, watching as Hunter and Bella raced across the fenced meadow, their movements fluid and powerful under the warm Montana sun. Bella's coat had regained its luster, her once gaunt frame now healthy and strong. The scars from her surgeries remained visible pale lines against her golden fur, but they no longer defined her. The sanctuary occupied 20 acres of donated land outside Oak Ridge, formerly part of a bankrupt cattle ranch. 6 cabins housed staff and provided recovery space for the more traumatized animals. A state-of-the-art veterinary clinic occupied what had once been the ranch house, and scattered across the property. Safe enclosures allowed 27 German shepherds to heal at their own pace, some still wary of human contact, others gradually rediscovering trust. "Quite a view," Jason said, joining Emma at the railing. In the years since they'd exposed Westlake Research, his role had evolved from volunteer to full-time operations manager for the sanctuary. The gray in his beard had increased, but his eyes carried less weariness now, reflecting purpose instead of resignation. "I never get tired of watching them," Emma replied, smiling as Bella playfully tackled Hunter in the tall grass. "A year ago, I wasn't sure she would survive the night." The aftermath of what local media dubbed the Westlake scandal had unfolded with breathtaking speed. Sarah Parker's exposé, accompanied by damning documentation and video evidence, had created a firestorm that quickly spread from local coverage to national networks. Federal investigators had descended on Oak Ridge within days, seizing records and interviewing employees. Richard Westlake had surprised everyone by offering a full confession, detailing years of ethical violations, falsified research reports, and inhumane treatment of research animals. Whether motivated by genuine remorse or strategic legal calculation, his cooperation had provided crucial information for treating the affected dogs and had somewhat mitigated his sentence 8 years in federal prison rather than the potential 20 he had faced. Westlake Research itself hadn't survived the scandal. The pharmaceutical giant that had been Oak Ridge's economic lifeblood had collapsed under federal indictments, shareholder lawsuits, and public boycotts. The massive facility now stood empty on the edge of town, a concrete and glass monument to ambition, unchecked by compassion. "Dr. Patterson called," Jason said, interrupting Emma's reflections. "The blood work on the Miller Creek group came back clean. No lingering toxins. Organ function normal across all parameters." Emma felt a wave of relief. The 4 shepherds found near Miller Creek had been among the last recovered, their physical condition compromised by nearly 2 weeks of exposure and inadequate nutrition. That's 18 fully cleared now, just 9 still under medical monitoring. Not bad for animals that were supposed to die without Westlake's specialized care, Jason noted with satisfaction. The sanctuary's creation had been a community effort, born from the same scandal that had nearly destroyed Oak Ridge economically. When Westlake Research imploded, taking hundreds of jobs with it, the town had faced potential collapse. Instead, residents had rallied, transforming crisis into opportunity. The Mountain Haven Sanctuary had become both a rehabilitation center for the former research subjects and a symbol of the town's commitment to redemption. Emma's phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah Parker. "Story on Sanctuary anniversary runs tomorrow. Front page. Sending photographer this afternoon." The journalist had parlayed her Westlake expose into a career-making triumph, earning regional awards and a job offer from a major Denver newspaper which she had declined, preferring to remain in Oak Ridge where, as she put it, the real stories happen. Her ongoing coverage of the sanctuary's development had helped attract donations and volunteers from across the country. "Mail came," Jason said, handing Emma a small stack of envelopes. "Including another letter from your father." Emma took the familiar prison stationery without comment. Richard Westlake wrote regularly, sometimes clinical observations about the dogs based on sanctuary updates, sometimes more personal reflections as he grappled with the consequences of his actions. She read each letter carefully, but had yet to visit him or respond directly. The wound remained too raw, the betrayal too profound for easy reconciliation. Sheriff Thompson's patrol car appeared on the sanctuary's gravel driveway, dust billowing behind it as he parked beside the clinic. He visited weekly, often bringing donations collected at the department. Since the scandal, he had adopted 2 of the recovered shepherds himself, one as his new canine partner, the other as a family pet. "Mike's early today," Jason observed, "probably checking security for the anniversary event tomorrow." Emma replied. The sanctuary's one-year celebration would bring media attention and visitors positive exposure they needed for continued funding, but also a security concern given lingering controversy around the Westlake case. As if summoned by their conversation, Hunter appeared at the bottom of the porch steps, alert and watchful. Of all the recovered dogs, he remained the most remarkable, his intelligence and awareness sometimes still startling even those who worked with him daily. Emma had long since stopped being surprised when he seemed to understand complex conversations or anticipated needs before they were expressed. "Everything's fine, Hunter," she assured him. "Just visitors coming for tomorrow's preparations." The German shepherd studied her for a moment, then turned and trotted back to where Bella waited at the meadow's edge. Their bond had only strengthened during recovery. The 2 dogs rarely separated for long. Emma had considered finding them adoptive homes once they were fully rehabilitated, but ultimately couldn't bear to part them or to lose them from her own daily life. Sheriff Thompson climbed the porch steps, removing his hat as he approached. "Afternoon, Doc, Jason." He nodded to each of them, then gestured toward the meadow where several shepherds roamed. "They're looking good. Hard to believe what they've been through." "They're resilient," Emma agreed. "More than we sometimes give them credit for." "Speaking of resilience," Thompson said, his expression turning more serious, "there's something you should know. Richard Westlake has been granted compassionate release. Medical evaluation found stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Prognosis is 3 to 6 months. The news hit Emma like a physical blow. She had maintained emotional distance from her adoptive father throughout his incarceration, protecting herself from fully confronting the complicated tangle of love, betrayal, and ethical outrage his actions had evoked. Now time for resolution was suddenly, drastically shortened. When she managed to ask, "Tomorrow. His lawyer contacted me this morning, asked if I'd notify you." Thompson studied her reaction carefully. "He's being released to a hospice facility in Missoula. No travel restrictions, provided he keeps the court informed of his whereabouts." Emma nodded. Unable to formulate a more coherent response, Jason placed a supportive hand on her shoulder, understanding without words the conflict she faced. "I should get back to preparations," she said finally, needing space to process this unexpected development. "The anniversary event is under control," Jason finished gently. "Take some time. Emma, go for a walk. Clear your head." She nodded gratefully and descended the porch steps, whistling softly for Hunter and Bella. The two shepherds responded immediately, falling into step beside her as she headed toward the wooded trail that circled the sanctuary property. The path was peaceful, dappled sunlight filtering through pine boughs overhead. Emma walked slowly, mind churning with memories and unresolved questions. How should she feel about her father's impending death? What, if anything, did she owe the man who had raised her, educated her, shaped her career, and then betrayed her trust so profoundly? Hunter pressed closer to her side, sensing her distress. Even now, after everything she had learned about his development, Emma found herself in awe of his emotional intelligence. The documents from Westlake Research had revealed the extent of the genetic manipulation involved in creating him, including the incorporation of human DNA markers for enhanced empathetic response. Her DNA. The knowledge still disturbed her, but she could no longer see it as making Hunter less authentic. If anything, it created a bond between them that transcended ordinary human-animal relationships. "What would you do?" she asked the shepherd softly, knowing the question was absurd, yet somehow still expecting his understanding. Can there be forgiveness after such betrayal? Hunter's amber eyes met hers, thoughtful and calm. Then he looked ahead down the trail, as if indicating the path forward was the only answer that mattered. Bella ranged ahead of them, occasionally glancing back to ensure they followed. Her recovery had been the most challenging. Medically, the experimental procedures performed on her had created complex autoimmune responses that required ongoing treatment. Yet her spirit had remained unbroken. Her trust in Hunter absolute, and her gradual acceptance of human care a testament to resilience. Emma's phone buzzed again, a reminder of tomorrow's schedule. The anniversary celebration would bring donors, media, and community members to showcase the sanctuary's progress. Former Westlake employees who had found new purpose caring for the very animals they once viewed as test subjects. Local businesses that had pivoted to support the sanctuary when the research facility closed. Sheriff Thompson would speak about law enforcement's role in animal welfare. Sarah would serve as master of ceremonies. And now, potentially, Richard Westlake might attend a dying man seeking what reconciliation, forgiveness, understanding. As Emma reached the highest point on the trail, she stopped to gaze across the sanctuary grounds spread below. From this vantage point, she could see the entirety of what they had built: the cabins, the clinic, the carefully designed enclosures where traumatized dogs could heal safely. Staff members moved between buildings, preparing for tomorrow's event. In the largest meadow, several shepherds played together under the watchful eye of a trainer dogs that had once known only laboratory confinement, now experiencing joy and companionship. The sight settled something within her. Whatever her father's motivation, scientific ambition, military contracts, or genuine belief in a greater good, the suffering he had caused was real. But so was the healing that had followed. The sanctuary existed because of his crimes, yet represented everything he had failed to value: compassion over progress, dignity over utility, relationship over results. Emma's phone rang. Sarah Parker calling rather than texting this time. "Have you heard?" the journalist asked without preamble. "About my father?" "Yes. Mike just told me. He wants to attend tomorrow. His lawyer called, asking if he could speak briefly at the ceremony." Sarah's tone made her skepticism clear. "I told them I'd have to consult with you first." Emma watched as Hunter and Bella moved down the slope ahead of her, returning toward the main compound. "What do you think his agenda is?" "Hard to say," Sarah replied. "Could be genuine remorse. Could be attempting to salvage some fragment of his legacy. Could be simply wanting to see you before the end." She paused. "For what it's worth, I've interviewed him 3 times during his incarceration. There's been a transformation there, whether from prison, public disgrace, or facing mortality. I can't say for certain." Emma considered this. "If he comes, I want restrictions. No press interviews, limited time, and he doesn't approach the dogs, especially not Hunter and Bella." "I'll convey the terms," Sarah agreed. "Are you sure about this?" "Emma, no one would blame you for refusing him access." "I'm not sure of anything," Emma admitted, "except that I don't want to make tomorrow about him or our family drama. It's about what these animals have overcome and the community that formed to help them." After ending the call, Emma continued down the trail, her decision crystallizing with each step. She would allow her father to attend, to witness what had risen from the ashes of his ethical failures, not for his sake, but for her own and for the full circle completion of the sanctuary's first-year journey. As she rejoined the main compound, Emma found Hunter and Bella waiting patiently by the clinic steps. Bella's head rested comfortably on Hunter's shoulder, his protective stance subtly adjusted to support her still recovering frame. The simple tableau of loyalty and care stood in stark contrast to the clinical detachment that had characterized their treatment at Westlake Research. Jason emerged from the clinic carrying medication for the evening rounds. "Got everything sorted?" he asked, reading her expression with the familiarity born of their year working side by side. "As much as possible," Emma replied. "My father will be attending tomorrow, briefly, under strict conditions." Jason nodded, accepting her decision without judgment. "Whatever happens, remember what we've accomplished here. 27 dogs rescued, a community rebuilt around compassion rather than exploitation. Your father's legacy isn't the only one being written in this story." Emma knelt beside Hunter and Bella, drawing strength from their presence. Tomorrow would bring closure of a sort, though whether through confrontation or reconciliation remained to be seen. For now, she focused on the tangible reality before her animals' healing, a sanctuary thriving, a purpose fulfilled. "Come on, you two," she said, rising to her feet. "We've got work to do before tomorrow." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sanctuary grounds, Emma moved forward with Hunter and Bella at her side, 3 survivors whose intertwined paths had transformed not just their own lives, but an entire community's understanding of what it meant to heal, to protect, and to restore what had been broken. As we look at Hunter and Bella's journey, we're reminded of life's most profound lessons about loyalty and redemption. These German shepherds, abandoned and abused, never lost their capacity to love, just as we, in our own lives, have weathered disappointments, yet kept our hearts open. When Hunter refused to leave Bella's side despite his own injuries, he showed the kind of devotion many of us remember from our own faithful companions throughout the years. Emma's sanctuary represents what we all seek in our wisdom years, the chance to transform past wounds into purpose. Like the town of Oak Ridge rebuilding itself around compassion rather than profit. We too have opportunities to redefine our legacies as we move forward. The relationship between Emma and her father reminds us that reconciliation is complicated, that forgiveness is a journey rather than a destination. As we reflect on our own family relationships, some healed, some still wounded, we recognize that time is precious and limited. Hunter and Bella's story speaks to our deepest hopes that loyalty matters, that second chances are possible, and that even in our darkest hours, we are never truly alone if we have each other.